Heavenly Father, today I do not come trusting in who I am, but recognizing that without you my heart can drift, that it can quietly elevate itself without me even noticing. And for that reason I stand before you with humility, asking that you do not allow my heart to become proud before you, because I understand that pride does not always appear in obvious ways. It often begins as a subtle shift within, as a quiet sense of self-reliance, as a way of thinking where I begin to depend on myself more than I depend on you without even realizing it. Your word in Deuteronomy 8:14 warns that the heart can become lifted up and forget the Lord. And that warning is not distant or symbolic. It is real, it is present, and it can happen even while I continue moving forward in my daily life, even while my actions may appear right on the outside. Because pride does not always change what I do immediately, but it changes the source from which I do it. It alters my dependence, it shifts my posture, and it slowly moves you out of the center even when nothing outward seems out of place. I recognize that there are moments when my thinking leans toward myself, when I assume I understand enough, when I move forward without seeking you first, when I respond without pausing to consider your direction. And those are the moments where pride begins to form quietly, where the heart starts to rise in ways that are not immediately visible. And today I do not ignore that reality. I bring it before you with clarity, because I do not want anything to grow within me that would lead me away from your will. Your word in Proverbs 16:18 says that pride goes before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall. And I understand that pride is not harmless. It is not small. It is not something that can remain without consequence. It distorts perception, it weakens discernment, and it places me in a position where I can begin to move forward without recognizing that I am no longer aligned. And today, I do not want to walk in that direction. I do not want to continue in something that has already been warned against. In James 4:6, you say that you resist the proud but give grace to the humble. And that truth reaches me deeply, because I do not want to be in a place where I am moving forward but without your favor, where I am continuing in my own strength while being resisted by you, where I am relying on myself while losing sensitivity to your voice. And for that reason I ask you to guard me from any form of pride that would separate me from the grace you are willing to give. Search what is within me beyond what I can perceive on my own, because I know that I do not always recognize when my heart begins to rise. I do not always see when my dependence decreases. I do not always notice when my posture shifts. But you see every intention, every thought, every hidden inclination. And today I ask you not to allow any of that to remain unaddressed. Do not let pride take root. Do not let it settle. Do not let it shape how I think or how I live. Your word in Jeremiah 9:23-24 reminds me not to boast in wisdom, strength, or riches, but to understand and know you, and I take that as a correction for my inner life, because there are areas where I could easily rely on what I know, on what I can do, or on what I have, and without realizing it, begin to depend less on you. But today, I choose not to establish my confidence in those things. I choose to remain grounded in the understanding that everything I am and everything I have is sustained by you. I do not want my heart to become elevated when things are going well. I do not want it to become independent when there is stability, because I understand that pride often grows in moments where there is no pressure, where everything seems to be in order, where there is no immediate need. And in those moments, the heart can begin to forget. It can begin to shift. It can begin to move away from dependence without any visible warning. And today I ask you to keep me aware even in those moments. Keep my heart in the right position before you, not only in difficulty, but also in ease. Not only when I feel the need to seek you, but also when everything seems to be under control. Do not allow my relationship with you to weaken in times of stability. Do not allow my dependence to decrease when there is no visible struggle, because I do not want to seek you only when I need something. I want to remain in a constant posture of recognition that without you I cannot sustain what you have given me. Today, I do not attempt to correct myself through my own strength. I come before you acknowledging that I need your ongoing intervention, because pride is not removed by effort alone. It is restrained when the heart remains aligned with you, when the mind is shaped by your truth, and when life is lived in real dependence and not in appearance. And for that reason, I place myself in that position intentionally, not as a temporary response, but as a conscious decision. Guard my inner life from any form of self-exaltation, from any thought that pulls me away from you, from any attitude that reduces my need for you, and establish within me a steady humility that does not depend on circumstances, that does not shift based on what is happening around me, but that remains grounded in the truth of who you are and who I am without you. And as I move forward today, I do so with awareness, not relying on my own perception, not trusting my own understanding, but recognizing that I must remain aligned with you in everything, because only in that place will my heart remain in its proper position, not elevated, not drifting, but anchored in you. Lord, as I continue before you, I recognize that pride is not only something that appears in visible attitudes. It is something that can establish itself in the inner life long before it is expressed outwardly. And I do not want to carry something within me that quietly shifts my dependence away from you, because I understand that the moment my heart begins to rely on itself, it begins to move out of alignment with what you are establishing in me. And that shift can happen without noise, without warning, and without immediate consequence. Yet it still leads in a direction I do not want to follow. Your word in 1 Corinthians 10:12 says, "Let anyone who thinks that he stands take heed lest he fall." And I understand that this is not a warning for someone far from you. It is a warning for someone who believes they are secure, someone who assumes stability, someone who no longer examines their own condition. And I do not want to become that person. I do not want to assume that I am beyond correction, beyond vulnerability, or beyond the need to remain watchful over my own heart. There are moments where I feel confident in what I know, where I feel steady in what I have learned, where I feel secure in the way I have been walking. And in those moments it becomes easy to lower my guard, to stop examining my inner life, and to assume that nothing needs attention. But I understand that pride often grows in those exact conditions, where awareness is reduced and dependence is replaced by confidence in self. Your word in Luke 18 speaks of the Pharisee who stood and prayed about himself, believing he was righteous, while the tax collector stood at a distance, unable even to lift his eyes, asking for mercy. And I see in that contrast the difference between a heart that has elevated itself and a heart that remains humble before you. And I do not want to become someone who approaches you with self-assurance. I want to remain in a place where I recognize my need for you, not only in moments of weakness, but at all times. I ask that you keep me from the subtle forms of pride that disguise themselves as confidence, that appear as strength but are rooted in self-reliance, that feel justified but are disconnected from true dependence on you, because I understand that pride does not always announce itself clearly. It often blends into the way I think, into the way I evaluate situations, into the way I respond, and if I am not attentive, it can shape my decisions without being confronted. Your word in Obadiah 1:3 says, "The pride of your heart has deceived you." And that reveals something important, that pride does not only elevate, it also deceives. It distorts perception. It creates a false sense of clarity, and it causes me to trust what is not truly aligned. And I do not want to walk in deception thinking I am right while being misaligned internally. Guard me from trusting my own perception when it has not been examined by your truth. Guard me from forming conclusions based only on what I see. And guard me from assuming that my understanding is sufficient without your direction, because I recognize that pride often expresses itself in the belief that I already know enough. Your word in Isaiah 66:2 says that, "You look to the one who is humble and contrite in spirit and trembles at your word." And I understand that what you value is not outward appearance but inward posture, not performance but sensitivity, not self-assurance but reverence. And I ask that you establish that kind of posture within me, one that does not become casual before you, one that does not become overly familiar to the point of losing reverence, and one that remains aware of who you are and who I am in relation to you. There are times when I could easily move forward without seeking you first, when I could rely on past experience, when I could make decisions based on what has worked before. But I understand that past experience cannot replace present dependence, and that what once aligned does not guarantee that I am aligned now. And for that reason, I do not want to move from a place of assumption. I want to remain in a place of continual alignment with you. Your word in Micah 6:8 says that what you require is to do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly with you. And I see that humility is not an occasional posture. It is a way of walking. It is something that must be carried consistently, not only in certain moments, but in every step, in every decision, in every response. And I ask that you form that kind of walk within me, one that does not shift depending on circumstances, one that does not rise when things go well or fall when things go wrong, but one that remains steady in its recognition of you. I do not want to allow pride to find space in my thoughts, in my decisions, or in my responses. I do not want it to shape the way I interpret situations, and I do not want it to influence how I carry myself, because I understand that once pride is allowed to remain, it does not stay contained, it spreads. It affects perception, it affects relationships, and it affects alignment with you. Your word in Psalm 138:6 says that though you are exalted, you look kindly on the lowly, but the proud you know from afar, and I take that seriously, because I do not want to be distant from you while thinking I am close. I do not want to be known from afar because my heart has elevated itself. I want to remain near. I want to remain in a place where my heart is positioned correctly before you, where I am not drawing away through internal elevation, but drawing near through humility. So today I ask you to keep me aware, to keep me attentive, to keep me from becoming careless with my inner life, and to keep me from allowing anything to grow within me that would separate me from you, because I understand that guarding my heart is not passive, it is intentional. It is something that requires attention, and it is something that must be maintained through alignment with you. As I continue through this day, I choose not to rely on my own perception, not to depend on my own understanding, and not to assume that I am beyond correction, but to remain in a posture where I am open, where I am attentive, and where I am continually aligned with what you are establishing within me, so that my heart does not rise, does not drift, and does not move into a place where it no longer reflects the humility that keeps me close to you. Beloved Father, as I remain before you with intention and awareness, but in how it gradually forms beneath the surface, shaping my inner posture before I even realize what is happening, I do not want to carry within me something that slowly distances me from you while everything outward still appears in place, because I understand that pride does not need to be visible to be active. It can exist in the way I think, in the assumptions I make, and in the subtle shift where I begin to rely less on you and more on my own understanding. Your word in Deuteronomy 8:14 warns that the heart can become lifted up and forget the Lord, and I do not want to live in a way where I move forward externally while drifting internally. I do not want to reach a point where I continue advancing in life, but no longer recognize your hand in what I have or where I am going. Your word in Daniel 4 reveals how King Nebuchadnezzar looked at what had been established and attributed it to his own power, declaring that he had built it by his might and for his glory. And in that moment, his heart was lifted. I see in that example how easily the human heart can take what has been given and transform it into something that feeds pride instead of gratitude. I do not want to fall into that pattern. I do not want to look at anything in my life and quietly take ownership in a way that removes you from the center. There are moments where I could begin to measure myself by what I have achieved, by what I understand, or by how I have grown, and in doing so shift my focus away from you and toward myself. I understand that this is where pride begins to take shape, but through internal credit, through subtle recognition of self, and through a mindset that forgets the source of everything. Your word continues in Deuteronomy to remind that it is you who gives the ability to produce, and that forgetting that truth leads the heart to elevate itself. I do not want to disconnect what I have from the one who provided it. I do not want to separate the outcome from the source, and I do not want to live in a way where I benefit from what you have given while slowly losing awareness of your hand in it. Guard me from internal narratives that place me at the center, from thoughts that attribute success to my own strength, and from attitudes that begin to value my own ability above your provision. I understand that pride is sustained when I begin to believe that what I have is the result of who I am rather than who you are. Your word in Psalm 115:1 says, "Not to us, Lord, not to us, but to your name be the glory." And I take that as a correction to every internal tendency that seeks recognition for itself. Because I know that even if I do not say it out loud, the heart can still seek its own elevation in quiet ways. There are areas in my life where I have seen growth, where I have experienced progress, and where I have been able to move forward, and I acknowledge that without your hand, none of that would exist. Without your direction, none of it would remain, and without your sustaining power, none of it would continue. I ask that this awareness would not be momentary but constant, that it would shape how I think about myself, how I interpret what I have, and how I carry what has been entrusted to me. Your word in 1 Peter 5:5 says that all of us are to clothe ourselves with humility toward one another because you oppose the proud but give grace to the humble. I understand that humility is not an occasional response. It is something that must be worn, something that must be present in how I carry myself, something that must define my posture not only before you, but also in how I interact with others. Keep me from comparing, from measuring, from elevating myself internally in relation to others, and from forming judgments that position me above where I should be. Because I understand that pride often expresses itself in comparison, in silent evaluations, and in the need to feel above rather than aligned. Your word in Philippians 2:3 instructs me to do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit, but in humility to consider others better than myself. I take that as a direction for my inner life, not only for my actions, but for how I think, for how I perceive, and for how I evaluate, because humility is not only demonstrated externally, it is formed internally in how I view myself in relation to others and in relation to you. I do not want to allow pride to remain in hidden places. I do not want it to shape my thoughts, my perceptions, or my responses, and I do not want it to influence the way I move forward. I understand that once pride takes hold, it begins to distort everything. It shifts focus, it weakens dependence, and it leads away from the alignment that keeps me grounded in you. As I continue in this moment, I choose to reject every form of self-exaltation, not only in what is visible, but also in what is hidden, not only in what is spoken, but also in what is thought. And I place my inner life before you with the awareness that I need your correction, your alignment, and your truth to remain in the right position. Keep my heart from rising, keep my mind from shifting, and keep my life from moving in a direction where I am no longer dependent on you. And as I move forward today, let everything within me remain grounded in the truth that without you I am sustained, without you I am directed, and without you I cannot remain aligned, so that my heart does not become proud, but remains positioned in humility before you at all times. Faithful Father, as this time before you reaches its final moments, I do not want what you have brought into awareness within me to fade as soon as I step into the rhythm of this day, because I understand that pride does not need much space to return. It only needs a lack of attention, a moment of self-reliance, or a quiet shift in my dependence for it to begin forming again beneath the surface. I do not want to leave this moment unchanged, and I do not want to carry forward anything that has already been exposed, corrected, or brought into the light, because I recognize that what is not guarded will not remain aligned, and what is not maintained will slowly return to its former state. Your word in Deuteronomy 8:14 has made it clear that the heart can become lifted and forget you, and I do not want to move through this day with a heart that slowly drifts into forgetfulness, where I begin to function as though I am sustaining myself, where I begin to act as though I am the source of what I have, and where I begin to live as though my strength is sufficient without you. I understand that forgetting you does not always look like turning away completely. It often looks like moving forward without conscious dependence, making decisions without seeking you, and responding to situations without considering your truth. And I do not want to live in that subtle separation. Your word in John 15:5 reminds me that apart from you, I can do nothing. And I take that as a foundation for how I move forward today, not as a statement I acknowledge once, but as a truth I carry in every step, in every thought, and in every decision. Because I understand that the moment I disconnect from that truth is the moment my heart begins to elevate itself. I do not want to operate from a place where I believe I am capable on my own. I want to remain rooted in the awareness that everything I am able to do is sustained by your presence within me. I recognize that pride often attempts to return in subtle ways, not through obvious rebellion, but through quiet independence, through the absence of seeking you, and through the assumption that I already know what to do. Your word in Proverbs 3:5-6 instructs me to trust in you with all my heart and not lean on my own understanding, and I understand that this is not only a direction for moments of uncertainty. It is a command for every moment, including those where I feel confident, stable, or capable. I do not want to lean on what I think I understand. I do not want to rely on what seems right to me, and I do not want to assume that my perception is enough without being aligned with you. As I move forward, I ask that you keep my heart sensitive, not hardened by familiarity, not dulled by routine, and not lifted by comfort. Your word in Hebrews 3:13 warns against being hardened by the deceitfulness of sin, and I understand that pride can contribute to that hardness. It can reduce sensitivity, it can make correction feel unnecessary, and it can create resistance where there should be openness. I do not want to lose sensitivity to your voice. I do not want to become resistant to your correction, and I do not want to carry a heart that no longer responds quickly to your direction. Your word in Psalm 25:9 says that you guide the humble in what is right and teach them your way, and I hold on to that as a promise, because I understand that humility is not only a position of the heart, it is also the condition that allows me to be guided by you. If my heart becomes proud, I lose direction, I lose clarity, and I lose the ability to be led, and I do not want to walk through this day without your guidance. I want to remain in a position where I can be directed, corrected, and aligned, not by my own reasoning, but by your truth. I also recognize that pride can affect how I respond to others, how I interpret situations, and how I carry myself in moments where I am tested. Your word in Romans 12:3 instructs me not to think of myself more highly than I ought, but to think with sober judgment, and I understand that this applies not only to how I view myself internally, but also to how I engage with the world around me. I do not want to respond from a place of elevation. I do not want to carry myself with an attitude that reflects self-importance, and I do not want to allow pride to shape the way I treat others or the way I see them. As I step into this day, I choose to remain aware, not in fear, but in clarity, understanding that my heart must remain guarded, my thoughts must remain aligned, and my dependence must remain active. I do not want to move through this day passively, assuming that what has been addressed will not return. I want to remain intentional, allowing what you have begun within me to continue shaping how I live, how I think, and how I respond. So I ask you, Father, establish what you have begun, strengthen what you have corrected, and maintain within me a posture that does not shift away from you, because I understand that pride is not overcome once. It is kept in check as long as I remain aligned with you. Keep my heart from becoming elevated, keep my mind from drifting into self-reliance, and keep my life grounded in the truth that I am sustained by you in every moment. Amen.